In renewed concern about Islamist ideology being preached on university campuses in Britain, the Council of Ex-Muslims in Britain released a report last week demanding a Muslim educational charity be labelled a hate group because it says their speakers have expressed anti-Semitic, misogynistic and homophobic views. The Islamic Education and Research Academy, or iERA, hosts events across UK university campuses and is currently being investigated by the Charity Commission. Last year, the group received around £800,000 in donations. Our reporter Bob Walker has been finding out more about the aims and views of the charity.
The Islamic Education and Research Academy made the headlines a year ago when it was claimed men and women were forcibly segregated during a debate at University College London. Halima Begum was there.
We thought this is ridiculous. You can't really have this. We can't really have this kind of segregation going on. We wouldn't do it on racial basis. Why would we do it on gender? There were these big bouncer guys, really, really big guys, and they were actually physically moving them.
iERA insists there was a mixed seating area, but sections were set aside for men and women who chose to sit apart. Anthony Glees is Professor of Politics at the University of Buckingham and Director of its Centre for Security and Intelligence Services. He says iERA's willingness to support gender segregation is just one example of its support for extreme views.
I don't think they're a charity as most people in Britain would understand it. What they do is radicalise young British Muslims under the guise of being an educational charity, and they put forward ideas and introduce speakers to students which, for the most part, are ideas that most British people and indeed most Muslims in the United Kingdom would find completely unacceptable.
We have an office here which is constantly under police protection, and many of the staff that actually work here are actually subject to death threats constantly.
The central London headquarters of the Quilliam Foundation, a think tank which says it tackles extremism in all its forms. It's been accused by some Muslim groups and individuals of encouraging Islamophobia. Haras Rafiq from Quilliam pulls no punches. He says views put forward by supporters of iERA and their invited speakers are full of hate, racism and xenophobia.
These are people who have set up the organisation and people who are part of the organisation. In addition to that, they actually have a long history of inviting people who have been excluded from entry into the UK. And these are people who very clearly show support for Osama bin Laden and believe that people who leave Islam to another religion should be killed. They do put a caveat in there, and the caveat is that ideally in an Islamic state, but really does it matter?
Rupert Sutton is head researcher at Student Rights, an organisation that investigates extremism at universities. It's associated with the Henry Jackson Society, which is described by critics as a neocon think tank. Student Rights was recently condemned by the National Union of Students as an insidious group which had created witch hunts against Muslims, accusations strongly denied by Rupert Sutton, who says they have genuine fears about iERA.
We have concerns about a number of the speakers who have views on issues relating to punishments for apostasy, homosexuality, issues such as domestic violence. So really very socially conservative views that often are given no challenge when they appear on university campuses. These aren't debates, they're just individuals coming on to talk. And particularly the fact that they run so-called Dawa training, which is training students to be outreach individuals or preachers, that these views may then being passed on to a kind of younger generation.
However, the Federation of Student Islamic Societies believes it's important that views put forward by speakers from iERA are heard. Ibrahim Ali is the Federation's Vice President of Student Affairs.
I've heard these views at, speakers called in Hyde Park and other functions and events, not only at university, and what should be the case is that people are clarifying and are saying that these are ideas that exist within a particular realm, sphere or context. And I think it's about contextualizing what is said and where it's said. But I think the key thing here for me is just allowing for those discussions to be had on campus. That's what's really important, that engagement, that interaction as well, and that people are exposed to a variety of views as well. I think that's part of that experience of being a student at university.
I've come down to the King's Cross area of London. I'm not allowed to say exactly where, but I'm outside the offices of an organisation that has been really leading the criticism of the Academy.
I am Mariam Namazi and I'm the spokesperson of the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain.
The Council has just published a highly critical report into iERA, which it says should be considered a hate organisation.
What we're trying to show is that this is not a normal religious organization. It's actually part of the far Islamic right, and it needs to be viewed in that context.
They argue strongly that these are theoretical discussions they've had. They are not literally calling for these kind of punishments in this country.
Well, this is something Islamists often do. They promote these sort of standards in what they call an ideal Islamic state. If this was an Islamic state, they would be supporting such measures, and they do support it in other places. These are not theoretical discussions. As we speak, there is a woman, Maryam Yahya Ibrahim, for example, in the Sudan, who is facing execution for apostasy. You've got people who've been sentenced to stoning in Iran, for example. So these are not theoretical discussions, they're very real.
So a range of criticisms from various organisations. I've now travelled by tube to North London, where I'm about to meet Salim Chagtai, who is one of the Academy's spokesmen.
There is a concerted campaign against what I would say is true Orthodox Islam. We're Islam as it is. A number of our speakers may have said a few things in the past which they've adequately apologised for. We've got our clarifications on our website.
With that in mind, and you mentioned Abdul Rahim Green, who is one of your main speakers.
Yes.
Can I play you something that he is shown saying? So this is when he's speaking at a Hyde Park corner.
Yep, sure.
Why don't you take the Yehudi over there, far away, okay? So his stench doesn't disturb us, okay? Yeah.
Now that's one of your main speakers, who is referring to a Jewish man in the crowd and saying, take him away so his stench doesn't disturb us.
This is something that we don't condone at all. This is something that Abdul Rahim Green said many, many years ago. He has since, on his blog and otherwise, retracted a number of statements such as this. At iERA, we have an anti-extremism policy, which is part of our compliance to be with the Charity Commission. I personally believe in engagement with the Jewish community. We're planning a visit with Abdul Rahim to meet a senior rabbi in London. This was before iERA, and we do not tolerate that, and we don't accept that in any shape or form.
Also in his blog, I think in 2006, he said that adultery should be punishable by a slow and painful death, by stoning. Again, this is someone who was one of your main speakers.
Right, so again, this is pre-iERA, but one thing that we make very clear now is that in Islam, the religion of Islam has a very clear and classical position. What Abdul Rahim was doing there was explaining the wisdom behind it. The actual burden of proof for punishment by adultery, it has to be for independent witnesses, and that's something which is hardly has ever happened in Islamic history.
Stoning to death, when those conditions are met, is acceptable.
As Muslims, we've believed that for 1400 years. Do I need to change that now? I think that would be something which is asking me to go against my freedom of consciousness. I'm not talking about implementing things like that here. It's a very theoretical question. The answers are there. I'm not going to deny what my religion says.
Is it accurate to say that you believe that apostates, those who leave the faith, can be killed?
No.
Well, I think this may be.
Play it. Yeah.
Again, the person's given the chance to repent, to think about what they're doing, and really, given that it's a capital offence, then only a real sort of person who wants to be a martyr or a lunatic, in which case they wouldn't be executed if they've got any mental problems, would actually go and advocate that, yes, I have left the religion and I'm open about it.
But you are there saying that it is a capital offence.
That this is something done in an Islamic state. This is something where if a person shouts from the rooftops that I've left Islam, and then they go through a due process, and if they still insist, then this is what I was referring to there.
Your idea of an ideal Islamic state, would you agree in the death penalty for people who are gay, people who have committed adultery, and people who are apostates, who have left the religion?
It's very clear. The Quran and Orthodox traditional Islam says that there are certain death penalties meted out. I'm not mincing my words about that. That's what God and His Messenger have said. But there are such stringent conditions. If you look at the implementation of it, it is far less likely for that happening than being hit by a bus. The raison d'etre of iERA is to sit and discuss, and from that, myths are dispelled and misconceptions are removed and human beings can work together. That's what we're here to do.
There's criticism that when you do go to universities or to any events, it's not a debate and extremist views are not challenged.
Absolute nonsense. We've got a body called the Big Debates. The whole UCL fracas was a debate. Research what we do, find out what we stand for, and come and talk to us.
Salim Chagtai and Bob Walker reporting.